John here with Ripewave Audio and back a seventh time with Sony's flagship AV receiver, the $3,200 STR-AZ7000ES. And this time we're going to take a deeper look at Sony's 360 reality audio, but this time with their reference setup of having not just the standard layout, but this time using bottom front speakers. And we'll tell you what all that means and why they have such a configuration. Now, this video follows the 6 other parts that we have done. In part 1, we did a comparison against its nearest competitors and an unboxing. And in part 2, we got this thing up and running with its configuration and the D.C.A.C 9 calibration. And then in part 3, we did a look at the user experience, including the sound modes that it has. And then in part 4, we did our classic ABC comparisons so we could see how this sounded versus all the other AV receivers and processors that we've looked at, well, just over a year now, from a lot of big brands like Marantz and Denon and Onkyo and so forth. And this did fare pretty well, just inching into the top tier. And I invite you to go back and see the details on that one. And then in part 5, we had our first part on the 360 reality audio, but there was a few things that didn't quite go right. At least we've learned since that we want to correct in this video, and we'll get to those. And then in part 6, we explored the use of dual center speakers to kind of focus the dialogue in the center of our television. So with this video, we're looking at 360 reality audio. Now, if you missed that other part that we did on that technology, this was covered in part 5, but we talked about it being an audio format. It's not a channel rendering format. This is how music content gets distributed. This is the intent. It's not the intent for video content like some of the other formats, but this is the intent of doing audio content that's immersive, using 100% objects, not a blend of bed layers and objects, but 100% objects. And the whole idea is so this can be mapped into a wide variety of playback types, starting at headphones. And so this is what we traditionally see is this advertised, marketed mostly for headphones to date. And even have a way to track with your head. And this is, kind of neat. I think they're doing that with VR systems as well. But it does expand into the speakers. Of course, then they start talking about sound bars and just simple one speaker configurations with all these array of speakers pointing up that can do the reality audio. But what about us who are home theater enthusiasts? How does it equate to the way we would normally lay out speakers? Now, we're used to having an ear level set of speakers and some height speakers, but they introduce floor level speakers, which are not just subwoofers. In fact, the whole standard really doesn't have an LFE channel that's defined in it. Yes, you can still use a subwoofer, but you're not getting a .1 LFE in the source content. The speaker layout is very similar to what we see in Dolby as far as the angles, but there's no rear surrounds. And we go into these angles in the other previous video. But just to touch on this lightly, if in case you missed that one, is we do compare it to Dolby Atmos, and you can see right away that Dolby Atmos has those rear surrounds, and this does not. Then as far as angles, the 30 degrees on the upper channel is very similar to what you would see on a Dolby Atmos, but we also have this lower at 20 degrees that's at the front. And that is a very interesting configuration. But I think what this format is really targeted at, for those who are doing mixing and mastering to master in 360 reality audio using this speaker layout, 5 on the ceiling, 5 at ear level, and 3 on the floor. And here is one of those studios that has employed this. This is Blackbird. This is the MCA McBride Studio, I believe. That's in Nashville. And this studio, this studio can do Dolby Atmos, but it can also do 360 reality audio. And they've had top name clients in this studio for their 360 setup. This is in Studio C. They're employing all Genelec speakers. They have 3 in the front that are ear level. They have 3 in the front that are at the height level, but they also have the 3 on the floor in the front. Now they talk about 2 rear ear level speakers, but these equate to what we would call side surrounds, not rear surrounds. And then they have 2 rear height channels. And so this is what is the traditional layout that they have here, this 13-channel layout for this. And they say that all that mix and master with this format should be using the speaker layout. But they don't really intend that all that listen, and they don't expect many to actually have this layout when you play it back in your house or using your phone and your headphones. But there are some receivers that support the formats. But just right now, I think Sony's the only one that supports this layout. So this is a table that's available that shows the products that do support this. And we do see that Amazon and Denon and Marantz and Macintosh and Sennheiser and Sony are all using this format just in different ways. Some connect using Apple's Airplay, or they use Chromecast, or in some cases HDMI. This receiver, the AZ7000ES, supports up to 13 channels of speakers. So therefore it has the potential of handling a full 360 reality audio layout as they're using in the mixing studio. And it does have that capability. Now, if you have the 5000 ES or the 3000 ES, that's 11 and 9 speakers respectively. So they won't be able to do the full reality audio layout, but I'm sure they'll be able to do some sort of subset of that. We haven't looked into the details, but they do support 2 subwoofers in addition. Of course, that's 1 subwoofer wired in parallel, and that subwoofer is not an LFE channel with the reality audio mix. It's just taking from the crossover points of the other speakers, but you can still use the subwoofers. Of course, this picture here has 32 speakers. Of course, you can't connect all those up at once, but it shows you all the capabilities of the 7000. So how do we hook up our system to do this 360 reality audio? Now, as I said before, this format, is heavily advertised for headphones, but it can adapt to other speaker layouts, almost any speaker layout you have. And that's really the beauty of this design, because they're all object-based. There's no bed layer. You can have whatever your renderer is for your processor or receiver, map those objects to whatever you have configured in your system. So when we set up this system to support reality, I just thought I should hook it up like they do in the mixing studio. We do have our height speakers, which is forward of me, between me and the main listening point now on the ceiling. Now in a mixing studio, those would be mounted more like height speakers in the front here. We do have our front height center speaker above the TV, plus our normal center speaker. Then on the floor, which you cannot see, is I found these monitor audio speakers that we use in another room. And I just brought these down to sit on the floor. Now, ideally, these would be tilted back a little bit, pointed a little more towards the ear of the listener, but here you go. And then for the center, I've got my Polk LSIM bookshelf, which is heavy, but it's getting the job done. So I do have this configured. Now I'm not using my rear surrounds in this configuration. That's why I could take this Polk LSIM and bring it up front. So with all this wired up, all this brought up to the front here, we can begin the configuration here. So I am going to go through and look at the, your auto calibration here. Runs your setup again. We'll start this configuration. I'm going to reset preset 1 from my last configuration, which was just the center height alone. And we don't using any wireless speaker here. We're not using the television speaker. So we move on to the first decision we have to make, which is what we're going to do with the surround back terminals. So this last choice, and if you saw our first video, this is where I said, bottom front, what is that? And then the abbreviation 360RA didn't sink in my head that that's 360 Reality Audio. I'm not good with acronyms, but that's what they mean. So when you select 360 bottom front here, at this point, it's locking you in to that 5 ear level, 5 on the height, and 3 on the floor configuration. And that's what you get. You can't mix and match these. I can't put the bottom front and not do a top center speaker. I not do the top first row speakers. It's not going to allow. It's going to assume that you're doing a full 5-5-3 configuration. So I thought that was interesting. So once you hit this bottom front, it jumps you right over to this, and the only choice you have is whether you're doing a .1 or .0, meaning do you have a subwoofer or not. I do have a subwoofer, so I added it. And with that selected, you can confirming your speaker pattern as a 5-1-5-3 360 Reality Audio reference. Okay. And here's where the different speakers are. So we're assuming front, center, surround are all going to be the normal speakers, and these are side surrounds. And our top front and left and right are going to be the same, but top center, this is going to be wired to height 3 right. And our bottom front left is going to be surround back left. And our bottom center is going to be height 3 left. And our bottom front right is going to be surround back right. And once all that wiring is in place, you can run your Sony D.C.A.C 9 calibration. And when that's completed, it will show all the distances for each of these speakers. Start to overlap a little bit when you've got these things on the floor. Figures out the distances and the levels. And at this point, you save the configuration and you're ready to listen. And, the last time I did this, and you have to do it from the phone. If you remember the chart there that said the Sonys only work with streaming from a mobile device. You can't do it over HDMI. The only way I could get it to work on my first go around with this was through Bluetooth to stream. Now, the Amazon Music app that I'm using said I was spitting out 360 Reality Audio. The on-screen display of the 7000ES doesn't tell you much. It doesn't tell you what the source is other than the fact this is coming in through Bluetooth. So I was a little unsure, am I really getting these Reality Audio experience? And when I did my ABC switcher to turn some channels off, it's like, what is it doing to the... I didn't hear much of a difference. It only just appeared to be at different levels. And then one of you did chime in and say, you're not doing it right. You can't have the Sony spatial sound mapping on at the same time as you're listening to Reality Audio. His point was well taken, but I was listening it to both ways and experiencing the same thing. So something more was going wrong. And as I said in the last video, I wasn't able to just do Airplay over the Ethernet from the phone. But for some reason, today when I attempted it again, I could do Airplay over Wi-Fi and get to this, and it worked, and there was a difference. this is now actually working as I thought it would. I'm getting a lot of dynamics through the room, very lively mixes of listening to things like Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow. Amazing reproduction on this, and to have the 360 on it. And now I get this format. And I get it from two different perspectives. One, the results are good. And of course, it all depends on the mixes. You know, somebody can mix something poorly and you don't get that. But comparing a well-done 360 audio mix with a Dolby Atmos mix, you can get very similar results. But I do appreciate the fact that because this is all object-based, you're not tied down to a very rigid, defined speaker placement and speaker count. This will adapt. It will remap depending on what you have in the room and where it's positioned. And that's something that you can't get out of a Dolby Atmos in the same way. And this, I think, is its value. And this is why I think those who are mastering engineers, mixing engineers, like it, because they only have to put together one mix, and now they're all ready to go for headphones, and they're ready to go for sound bars and 5-channel systems and 13-channel systems, all with one package that gets distributed and delivered the same to everybody. And I think that is the benefit of it. The problem is there just isn't a lot of content, maybe a few thousand songs out there right now, versus Dolby Atmos have really taken this by storm. I did find that I had to turn off the Sony spatial sound mapping from the receiver to make this really sing. In fact, I find having it on really sucks the bass out of the recordings anyways. Turning it off was more lively. Now I have my speakers in relatively the ideal positions. There's not a lot that I think that it's doing for speaker location, but that had to be turned off. And I'm listening to the mix as the mixing engineer and the mastering engineer intended. And I really like the results, and it makes it hard now to say, you know, this thing is going to go because I kind of like this, although having 3 speakers on the floor is not the most easy thing to live with. So, but if I have a dedicated room, boy, it'd be nice to set it up with this, but I'm not as compelled to go through this length if there isn't going to be a lot of content out there for me to enjoy, not just the inconvenience of having now 3 speakers on the floor, but to spend the money on those 3 speakers and the 3 channels of amplification needed to make it run. Now, I happen to use the amplifiers built into this, and it just seemed to work just fine. And of course, I have all my external ones handling the rest of the room. Yes, so this is a speaker layout, the 5.5.3 layout that we're getting here, that while Denon and Marantz can support this, and I did look into this, my Cinema 50 is able to, you know, configure a center height channel and all that, but it's not able to do the bottom ones. But it is able to take a MPEG-H, which is essentially this format that Sony's using is based on MPEG-H, and deliver that content as it's presented. And it's doing it through an HDMI connection and not through Airplay. So this is my feedback on the 360 Reality Audio with the intended 5.5.3 layout on this with using the floor channel speakers. Pretty impressive. I've tried it with them out. It does certainly blend in. You know, you kind of miss it, but then if you turn it off and you don't listen for a while, you don't miss it. But then you turn it back on, it's like, oh, that's better, right? So you'd know the difference. but you could probably live without it type of scenario, if you get what I mean. But what are your thoughts? Do you feel like this is something you'd set up in your house? That feedback would be important to this channel. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to take your involvement to the next level, we have our Patreon channel at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. And you can always give us a one-time donation. We just had a few come in. Thank you again. That really helps our channel. And we've got some big things planned. I've got 3 more receivers coming this week at the end of the week. You can always hit that bell notification to be notified when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.